On this episode, we visit Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We talk with the pedestrian and bicycle coordinator for the city. Then we learn about a new organization, Milwaukee Walks. Finally, we talk with a blind pedestrian about getting around Milwaukee. Stay tuned.
We're talking with James Hannig, who's the pedestrian and bicycle coordinator for the City of Milwaukee. What does a pedestrian and bicycle coordinator do?
Well, thank you. I do everything that's related to pedestrian and bicycle planning for the Department of Public Works for the City of Milwaukee. So a lot of my efforts just go towards implementing multimodal and pedestrian and bicycle projects here in the city.
What's behind us here?
Behind us is the beautiful Milwaukee River. We have our river walk, which actually goes along the river for quite a long ways of our downtown area on both sides of the river, and there are some potential ideas of expanding it in the future.
What does something like the river walk contribute to the city?
Oh, wow. Well, I think we see it as providing a lot of public access to the waterfront and our river itself. It's one of our big resources here at the city, or in the city. And it also, I think, has some clear economic development benefits in sort of including a lot of economic vitality here in our downtown core.
And you got a number of things coming up. You just started work on a pedestrian plan for the city. What's that all about?
Yeah, so it's very exciting. I actually just started in June, so I'm still getting a little oriented and some projects back up online. And as you mentioned, one of our projects that we're working on is this citywide pedestrian plan. So it's a really cool project. We just really started it. We're doing a lot of policy and project development process review at this point, but we're also working with our consultant and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee to do a pretty in-depth data analysis, which is going to include counting pedestrians at 20 locations throughout the city, as well as a yielding to pedestrian sort of analysis at various locations, 20 locations as well. Maybe not the same locations, but a lot of across the city. And then after that, we'll be working with the consultant to come up with policy, design recommendations, obviously even more programmatic type recommendations to really make walking better in the city of Milwaukee and safer.
And you just got started on it. Once it's finished, how do pedestrian plans get put into use? What have you seen in other cities that you hope you might be able to duplicate here?
Sure. Well, I've been doing a little bit of research in terms of what some of our peer cities might be doing. I think I've seen Wichita on the map as being a city to look at in terms of their pedestrian plan. But in terms of once we have our final plan in place or drafted, then it will go through our Common Council, which is very supportive of multimodal efforts right now in the city, and hopefully be adopted as an actual policy tool that will be used by our planners and designers and consultants throughout our project development process. So in reality, it will hopefully promote even more walking and pedestrian investments in the city of Milwaukee.
And you're getting, you have a full desk, just starting out. You also starting work on safe routes to school. What's going on there?
Yeah, so that is also a program project that we just started, just pretty much started, and we're today having our very first steering committee meeting, and we again are working with a consultant, and they're helping guide us on the citywide Safe Routes to School program, which is actually very focused on policy and programming side of things, partnering with Milwaukee Public Schools And so very similarly to the pedestrian plan, it's going to have a broader sort of citywide program policy recommendation at the end of this process, where I believe we have around 8 steering committee meetings scheduled monthly. But then we're also having an aspect of it where we will be coming up with 20 school-specific plans, which will look at a range of programmatic to infrastructure to even just trying to think of what else we're doing, other just sort of safety improvements around the school that can be taken to improve biking and walking to school by students in the city of Milwaukee.
Who do you have to get involved in a Safe Routes to School plan? I mean, what sort of people got invited to this afternoon's meeting?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously, Milwaukee Public Schools is a huge partner in that. We also have a number of representatives from various city departments, including Department of Public Works, Department of City Development. We also have representation from our Common Council and at MPS's administrative level, which is hopefully going to be very beneficial to making sure that these policy implications will be included in. But then also a number of really key stakeholders with various public community organizations, including a lot of local advocates and focused on pedestrian safety or just general neighborhood safety. So we've invited a fairly substantial list of, I want to say, 24-ish organizations and individuals. So a lot of different people. It definitely takes a village.
And we mentioned multimodal earlier. Some places they call that complete streets. What do you have planned for that in Milwaukee?
We also have that in the works right now. We have a draft complete streets policy that's being vetted by a number of our key stakeholder organizations, and we're gearing up for a public outreach effort. And up till now, we've worked with a lot of internal stakeholders and our consultant that we had hired to work on some policy recommendations and review of our current processes. And we're very happy with the current draft complete streets policy right now, and we're excited to hopefully get something presented to our Public Works Committee very shortly, and can start using that as something to back up implementing a lot of these multimodal visions for our city that our mayor, common council, and our city engineers support.
And when we talk about multimodalism, pedestrians, they don't just walk, they walk to transit. What do you have going on in the way of transit in the city?
Another good question. So just a couple blocks away, we actually have broken ground or are well underway on our first streetcar route, which goes through a lot of our central business district. And we're hoping to have that up and running by next fall, 2018. And we also, I know it's not necessarily transit per se, but we have a very well-received bike share system, which we focus, and it's well integrated with our county transit system. And we see a lot of value in trying to really better connect those last mile connections between transit and where people are coming from. So it's something as a city, as a Department of Public Works, we're very knowledgeable of and mindful of trying to make sure we're making those connections going forward.
So if I were to come back to Milwaukee, 10 years from now, what would you like to be able to show me that you've accomplished over that period of time?
Well, I think we're going to need a few days, because I think we really are at the beginning of a kind of a renaissance of multimodalism, if that's even a word, here at the City of Milwaukee. Whether it's the streetcar, our new Bucks Arena that's a few blocks the other direction, which is going to have a pedestrian mall, hopefully a much more integrated, not even more integrated, but farther reaching Riverwalk system. The pedestrian plan will already be hopefully under implementation, and our complete streets policy will be in place, and I think we will be able to say that pointing to a lot of these things that we're talking about right now as being the beginning of implementing even bigger things. So I think we'll have to expand our map of where I'll be bringing you.
We're in Milwaukee talking with Jessica Weinberg, who's Program Director for the Wisconsin Bicycle Federation. What is the Federation?
We are a statewide nonprofit advocacy group dedicated to making Wisconsin a better place to bike. And although it's not officially in our mission yet, we also work on pedestrian issues, myself especially. So I work on pedestrian issues through Share and Be Aware, a statewide education campaign working to make walking and biking safer by educating all road users, which is generously sponsored by the Department of Transportation. And then also, more recently, I and a group of concerned citizens in Milwaukee started Milwaukee Walks, because we really realized that we're facing a pedestrian fatality epidemic in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, and we're still struggling to have people really understand that this is an issue, to talk about it, and to decide to make changes to make walking even safer.
How do you go about starting a group like Milwaukee Walks, from basically nothing?
Yeah, you just email the people you know who might be interested. So I emailed the City of Milwaukee's Bicycle and Pedestrian Task Force and asked them if they would like to join. Other people who over the years have asked us questions about pedestrian issues, and then did some call outs on Facebook. And we have a list of about 30 people now. We've been active for about 9 months, I should say. And about 10 to 20 people come to meetings, and we've been able to get a meeting with the chief of police because enforcement is really one of our big concerns. And we've gotten some media coverage, and we're working to get much more media coverage to really have a public conversation about how should it be when you cross the street, and how can we get drivers in Milwaukee to follow the law and yield to people in marked and unmarked crosswalks.
So what has been done in the way of enforcement historically in Milwaukee?
Yeah, so a long time ago, actually, with Kit Keller, there was a really great Safe Routes to School program in Milwaukee where the police, the school district, the Bike Fed were working together, and Wisconsin Walks, when it existed, were all working together, and the police were doing tickets in school zones, and they really embraced the program and saw it as beneficial not only to traffic safety, but then for serving warrants and catching people with guns or drugs in the car. And we really thought that would set the stage for continued enforcement, but as soon as that grant money ran out, we saw a dwindling of enforcement in school zones. And then overall in Milwaukee, there's been a very steep decline in the number of traffic tickets written. We've decreased about 75% from what the high used to be of traffic citations. And if you talk to almost anyone in Milwaukee, they will say that anecdotally, it just feels like people can get away with anything in their cars, and that really is curtailing people's safety and their desire to want to cross the street because it feels more dangerous than it really should. So the reasons why that are happening are beyond the issues of pedestrian safety. I'm not exactly sure what it is all about, but that's part of why we want to talk to the chief and other police officers and really try to get to the bottom of it. And maybe automated enforcement is part of the solution. A lot of us think that. Currently, the Wisconsin State Legislature has outlawed automatic enforcement. So that would be a big push for our 30-person group to try to change a state law, but that might be really the direction we need to go.
On the infrastructure side, what's pedestrian infrastructure like in the Milwaukee area?
Yeah, the City of Milwaukee has done a lot of wonderful investment in pedestrian infrastructure. We're standing on one of them right now, the Booth Street Stairs, a really beautiful architectural stairway that goes down to the Riverwalk, the normal city sidewalk system, and the Beer Line Trail, with a really cool marsupial bridge where the bike and ped bridge is covered by a viaduct. So it's really great in the winter and the rain. You're dry on this whole long bridge that goes across the river. So the city is doing things like that are really impressive, and you can see that, where good pedestrian and bike facilities are created, there's investment. We're surrounded by condos that have sprouted up where factories have left. So that's really great. Our real big issue is where we have 4-lane roads and where the speed limit should be 30 or 35, but many people are going 50 or even higher and not yielding to anyone crossing the street. So we're seeing a lot of reckless driving. We're seeing a lot of crashes, car-to-car crashes, and then also, people walking are being victims of those as well. So there's a lot to do with infrastructure, and I've seen the city really take the right steps and do road diets where they can. I think our big question is, what are we going to do on these big arterials where there really is a lot of traffic, but it is dangerous? So that's kind of the next place to see what can we do that's innovative, that puts people and their safety first. And back to the enforcement thing, I do just want to say that both Milwaukee Walks and the chief of police are very concerned about unequal burdens of policing and how that can affect low-income and communities of color. And we have a consent decree from the Justice Department that's in process, and there's very serious issues with the police. And so we don't see enforcement necessarily as the silver bullet for improving pedestrian safety. But right now, it seems like no drivers either know or care that the law is that they're supposed to yield to pedestrians at marked and unmarked crosswalks. And we see enforcement as just one of those tools at some point that has to come into play, as well as speeding. Just if every single car is speeding, or if 70% of cars are speeding, it totally changes the environment for pedestrians. So we're really working to find a balance that's fair. And we would love to do what Finland does and have traffic tickets be relative to your income. That would be the most equitable way to deal with this situation. And we'll see if something innovative like that can happen.
Yeah, I don't think Milwaukee is unique in the concerns about the equity impacts of enforcement. Do you have problems with equity issues in terms of who is getting killed in the crosswalks and in crashes?
Yeah, that is one of the hardest things, is that I think the police chief also feels this with violence, that the communities that have issues with too much policing are also the ones who are the victims of so many of the crimes. So it's true with people walking and biking. Biking in Milwaukee is actually super safe. We rarely have a fatality. And walking is safe, even though we have some fatalities, but they are sadly concentrated in African American neighborhoods. Generally, also in our lower income Hispanic neighborhood, but this year somehow with the roll of the dice, luckily that community has only had 2 fatalities, which still is too many, including one a stepfather who was picking up his kids at school, and someone came speeding down. Witnesses say over 70 miles an hour. He pushed the kids out of the way and got hit and flew in the air right in front of the school. I mean, this kind of thing is terrible and shouldn't happen. But there are these patterns when you look at the crash data that along arterials in African American and Hispanic neighborhoods, we have a definite increase in fatalities and crashes.
And you were talking earlier about how they were doing enforcement around schools. The school just started recently. What's going on in terms of Safe Routes to School program now? Sometimes that's something that can catch people's attention, where adults might not care as much.
Yeah, the Bike Fed is really lucky to have worked long-term with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and the City of Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Public Schools on a Safe Routes to School program that focuses on education. And then we are also embarking, we had our first meeting yesterday with the City of Milwaukee and a consultant to do Safe Routes to School plans, where we'll work with 20 schools across the city and with the communities and parents there, and talk about traffic issues immediately around their schools, and then try to come up with solutions. And then the city is really interested in funding those solutions. So this is a planning process that really leads somewhere, which is always the best. So that's a really great piece that is coming together. One of the issues, just a background issue with Milwaukee, is that we have very intensive school choice, and so students can go to school almost anywhere in the city, and so that really reduces the number of kids who can walk and bike, because many kids are going very long distances to their school. And systematically, that would be another way to solve the problem, is to try to change that. But again, that's a very big issue to work on.
So if I were to come back in a few years and find out what Milwaukee Walks is doing, what would you like to be able to show me?
I'd like you to be able to cross the street to come and interview me, and the first car that sees you stops and lets you cross the street, very simply. I think right now, if we did that on Holton, we could do a little test. We could do that now and do it in 5 years. But it might take 10 cars or 20 cars for someone to decide to stop. So really changing that. And then making sure that pedestrian safety is better. Wisconsin has one of the worst disparities between black and white crash and fatality rates for pedestrians. People of color are almost twice as likely to be the victim of a pedestrian crash in Wisconsin. So I would really want to see that change, that we could go to any neighborhood in the city and that same thing would happen, where people are yielding to you and to everyone else in their community.
We're in Milwaukee talking with Kathy Brockman with the Vision Forward Association. What is the association?
The association is a nonprofit that serves people who are blind and visually impaired. And I'm a volunteer here and also serve on the board of directors.
What's it like for someone who's blind or visually impaired trying to get around Milwaukee?
Well, I think in some ways it's like any other city. It can be challenging. It seems people tend to drive faster now than they used to and don't always observe streetlights as well as they should. I mean, most people are good, but, there are some challenges. And I have some vision in one eye, although I'm considered legally blind. But there are people traveling who are totally blind. Usually it's the younger totally blind people who are more adventuresome. By the time people get to be older and my age, they usually don't care to do that. But it can be hard sometimes because people aren't always aware of pedestrians. We hear of people being distracted texting and doing other things while they're driving, and then I know that's a problem for motorists too. But some of the challenges then are just making sure that people do see you. Even if you use a red and white cane, it's supposed to tell people that a pedestrian is legally blind, or they may have a dog guide with them, which has a special harness. It's different than just having a pet on a leash. In those cases, they are supposed to stay a reasonable distance away from the pedestrian.
What's the experience been with the white cane laws? Are drivers recognizing that they're supposed to stop?
Not always. Matter of fact, I was reading an article not too long ago that I wasn't aware that many of the schools in this area of the country have not had free driver's education classes as part of their curriculum due to funding cuts. My husband and I don't have children, so we weren't aware of that. But so there are people who will actually just start driving without a license. I know there are courses available, but for some people, some families, the costs may be prohibitive, So you have people driving without a license. And even someone that I know told me that her daughter had got her license not too long ago, or she had taken classes, and she said the white cane law wasn't even mentioned, and I believe it's only one line in the manual that they use. So it's only one line in there. So it's not even mentioned. So a lot of people aren't even aware of it. I've even had people ask me about it. I was at a hospital once and somebody asked me if I was going down to the parking garage. I had my white cane out. It's like, no, I can't drive, But I would say that's the biggest thing, is that people don't know about it.
And since you don't drive, do you make use of transit to get around? How's that in the city?
Well, it's, the service could be better, but I'm glad that we do have it. Buses are usually about a half hour apart, and it's best to have schedules. So my husband and I use various means of transportation to get around. It can be buses. They also have paratransit vans, and people for that, they just pay a limited fee at $3.50 anywhere in the county. It is under the ADA law, but you can't go over county lines except in a few situations. So, it makes it, a little bit difficult if someone has to go out of the county. The other thing is my husband and I will either sometimes get rides from people who, friends and family, or, cabs once in a while. So we use a variety of different means of transportation.
And you spend a bit of time on the city sidewalks. What's the condition of the sidewalks like?
Well, it varies. In some areas, not as good. Some areas, are better. I mean, and I know the governments, they only have limited funding, to repair them. So, I try to be careful, walking.
If you could, give a simple message to, either the elected officials who are in charge of things, or to the people out there, drivers and other people out there, what messages would you give to people?
I would say just, to be aware of pedestrians in general, because, even, children can sometimes be distracted as they're walking across the street. And well, certainly pedestrians should also obey the laws that are applicable to them. But I would say to be aware of pedestrians, and especially be aware of either children or, people who are blind or visually impaired.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.